So we have Lesanne Brooks. Lesanne Brooks is an experienced transformative thinking partner to a lot of senior and mid-level leaders. She helps to facilitate and also coach design thinking, and she's a trainer and she's a mentor. In fact, Lesanne Brooke and Amanda Holt, who ran Dialogue, recently worked with one of our big clients in Ghana. And that's one of the things that Kadit does, is that when we meet you as a speaker, we decide to work with you in the future. So recently we worked together and it was great feedback from the team. Even the CEO of the company was extremely excited. So thank you very much, Lesanne. Lesanne, please, your audience.
Hello, thank you. Can you see me? Because I can't. Yeah, there I am. Okay, great. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Lovely to be here with you all. And I've been fascinated by listening to all the conversation and the comments and the wide range of what has been covered in the last few hours. Unfortunately, I missed some of the day, but it seems like you've been having a really interesting time. And thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. And and I start off here. Oh, goodness me. Sorry, I had that all up in the thing. Bear with me. I'm going to do the novice version of sharing a screen. There you go. I have done this 1,000 times before. You wouldn't think so. I'm going to start off by saying thank you. And the first thank you I want to say is to all of you that are here, because it's a Friday. I'm in South Africa on a Friday afternoon. You're not usually sitting in front of your computer screen, but clearly you all are. And I want to thank you for being here, for contributing to the space. And I also want to thank, obviously, Akadichi and Nana Yao, Ebenezer, the whole team for facilitating this process and for keeping the energy alive. And then I want to thank the people that have gone before me, because what I have seen has really shown there's so much synergy and there's so much difference. And I think that's what makes for such an exciting space. And so thank you, everybody, for contributing to this moment. And I invite you to sit back for the last talk of today. So I know that there will have been a lot of ideas shared, that you will have had different insights and different things that have struck you according to where you are in your Agile journey and what it is that you do in your day-to-day work. And I'm going to talk about agility practices in turbulent times from a high level of summing up some of the themes that we need to bear in mind as we go out into our workspaces again. And for me, one of the major things that gets us through, and I think that Valente spoke to this so well, is core strength. We need to be able to practice, we need to be able to develop our agility, and we need our own sense of inner core strength. And Robin asked what gives us the courage to stand up and be the questioner, the activist, the person that pushes agility through. And I believe that core strength has a lot to do with that. And it starts with knowing who we are, what we stand for, and what we believe in, because that gives us the courage to take the next steps. So the theme of turbulent times, we all know VUCA. And I just wanted to remind us all of how it sometimes feels, because we know that being hit constantly with disruption, being hit constantly with living with the unknown takes its toll. And the way in which we can face VUCA is to bring in a different approach to it, a VUCA approach, to always have a sense of what is our vision, what is it that we're trying to achieve, where are we heading towards. That helps us deal with volatility. When we lose ourselves in the turmoil, we have a sense, what am I aiming for? Where am I heading? I might have to go a different route, but I know what I'm aiming for. When there's uncertainty, we're looking for understanding. And understanding is not always easy, and we can't always understand the big picture. But we can do what is required to understand our next step. We can communicate, we can talk to each other, we can research, we can remind ourselves, hold on, why am I doing this again? Okay. We can give ourselves a little bit of understanding to give ourselves the courage to take the next step. Complexity, there's two C's for that. One is clarity. Sometimes, again, just clearing the window a little bit to know, all right, what can I do right now? I don't know what's happening tomorrow. I don't know what's happening next week. What can I do tomorrow? How can I unravel this a little bit right now to make for something a little bit clearer? So always looking for a moment of clarity or an insight that we can hold on to. And of course, the big C, communication. For me, that's the ultimate. If we're not talking, if we're not sharing information, if we don't have a shared vision, a shared understanding, if we're not constantly ensuring that everybody is on the same page, we get lost the minute it gets more volatile or the minute it gets more turbulent. And in an ambiguous world, more than ever before, we need agility. And agility is, as many speakers have said, not just the rituals and the practices and the language applied like a little sticker over on top of our usual performance. Agility is a real mindset shift. Agility is a way of being. Agility is a way of doing business and a way of looking at things differently that allows us to be able to move flexibly. And I don't think I need to tell anyone more about that right now, considering what you've been listening to all day. But what I really hope that you came out of these days is this sense of ideas and insight, recognizing how important it is right now for innovation and for us to create spaces for new ideas. Nobody really knows what is happening. We don't know. There's this talk about, Africa versus Europe versus America versus Australia. Everybody thinks they know the right way, the way to do it, etc. Nobody actually knows. Everybody is in turbulent times. And creating space for innovation and for ideas is critical. We need solutions. We need solutions to questions that we've never had to deal with before. We need solutions for things that are not only global, not only in our organizations, not only in our families, not only personally. We're dealing with it on all levels. And so it's really critical to be agile enough in ourselves to create the space to allow for ideas, to allow for insights. And there's a very big difference between insights and opinions from the people that are paid the most, as someone talked about yesterday. Arthur talked about, he introduced us to the hippo or the hypo, the high performing or the high paid person, the highest paid person in the room, and how often that idea is the one that dominates. So we hope that the activation of ideas and insights leads us towards a more collaborative reality, leads us towards a space where we can all make light together. We can all find ways to bring our strengths to the table, to create a reality that is enlightening, that enables us to see what we're doing, enables us to deal with turbulent times in a very constructive way. But we often find ourselves in a place where there have been a lot of solutions, ideas, innovations, breakthroughs, but somehow they just lose steam. They stop shining. They are not plugged in. They don't get done. Insights go to waste. Innovation just kind of disappears. Energy is depleted. And people often lose a sense of the value of continually bringing new energy, continually bringing new light bulb moments to the process, because we just have so many light bulbs that we've never used. That sense of excitement gets quickly depleted. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we take these light bulb moments that we have got from this shared space we've been in, and how do we move those out towards a more constructive solution-finding reality where we can bring our agility and our agile practices into this turbulent reality and really make a difference. And I'm talking from my experience. I am in the leadership space. I'm passionate about supporting people to be rebel leaders. I believe in supporting people to make a difference, to make change that is truly transformative. And I work with individuals, with groups, with organizations, pushing to make change. I work with rebel leaders in lots of different formats. And I also strongly believe that all of us are leaders, that we want to make a difference, that we can be change agents in our own field and in our own space. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership and the leadership space as a way of navigating the ideas that we have taken from these last 2 days. So we at Dialogue work with 4 different mindsets and leadership archetypes that we believe are very important at this time. In these transitioning times, we always need to have a rebel mindset. We need to have someone who is not only able to deal with disruption and diversity, but looks for it, looks to create it, questions it, asks why we're doing things this way, starts to shake the status quo. We also need the visionary mindset, the capacity to see where we're going, to look towards the change, and to collaborate towards creating that change. We need a connector who is someone who always the mindset or the archetype of making sure that everyone is included and aligned. And this becomes more and more important because the voices that are not heard at the table are the voices that probably have the solutions we haven't thought of before. And there are a lot of voices that have not been heard. And so this capacity to connect, to include, and to ensure that in the inclusion, it's not just a case of making sure the dominant voice gets put on top of those voices, but making sure that those voices are given space and that we make space and realign according to what is included. And then the last leadership archetype is the one of guide. As change emerges, as we empower people, as we start to move forward, we need the leadership capacity to hold space and enable people, guide people, notice where people are falling behind, notice where we've gone out of alignment. So these 4 archetypes, they don't have to be 4 different individuals. We have them, we have these capacities within ourselves, but they're not traditionally the kind of leadership archetypes that have got a lot of bells and whistles attached to them. We're getting more used to the idea of connector. We like visionary in certain innovative spaces, but we're a little bit cautious about whether guide has a real value or whether that's possibly just HR's job, and whether rebel should really be inside the organization or rather someone we read about in the newspaper. And so making space for the kinds of energies we need for real innovation is a work that we're continuously still doing. And we're looking at the need for change at different levels. We're looking at the need to recognize the interaction of these different levels. Turbulence is not just on one level anymore. And if we're not able to dance between the levels or to recognize that we have to pull them all together and thread them together, we miss our capacity to have impact. So what's really important about this is we might not have a skill set to play at all the levels, but if we can have an understanding or have eyes on different levels, it helps us to position ourselves. If I'm working at an object level, but I understand how that influences a network level and how that influences a system level, or how that is influenced by those, I can position myself in places of more impact. And so it's a way of really needing to work, sorry, excuse my turning of my page there, work at different levels and understanding that they're different levels. You can do all the change you like, but if you're not, say you're working at a network level, you can create the perfect network. But if you're not feeding down and influencing there and you're not aware of the influence of above, you're going to constantly come across obstacles. You're going to constantly be vulnerable to turbulence. But if you are keeping your eye on all the levels at all times and looking to make changes in ways that are aware of the other levels, you have more chance of being adaptive and being flexible within turbulent time. And we need to constantly go between these. It's about scanning our environment. So if we go back to the light bulb analogy, sorry, I see there are some questions in chat. I'm going to look at them at the end because otherwise I'm going to lose my screen. If there's anything urgent, please just unmute yourself and ask me, and I will happily stop and listen. So if we think about big systems, systems are the fields in which we operate, but they're also the way in which things have been done, the conventional power dynamics that we often dance with. And I think we're all pretty clear in today's world, and after the changes that have gone on in the last 2 years, we need a lot of systems change. And systems are influencing a lot of what we're doing. We need a huge upgrade, and this is the scariest part of the lot. This is where we all hold tight because we're not sure. And I believe we need to bring agility into systems and into ways of changing systems very strongly. And I think that this is one of the biggest places that is creating obstacles as it feeds down. So if one of your power lines is down, it doesn't matter how many light bulbs you have, you're just not going to get to shine. So we need, as leaders and as individuals within our organization, to have the capacity to zoom in and zoom out, to ensure that we're constantly looking at the field that our organization is working in. What's coming towards us? What is hindering us? Are we working in silos within the systems within our organization? Are we just keeping our information in little pockets? Does marketing have insights and, finance have the figures? Are we sharing? Are we making sure that within our organizations, within our teams, within our for me, it always scales up and scales down. It's the same principle. Are we making sure that the fields in which we are functioning are adaptive, are open to change, and are cross-functional, are speaking, are interconnected? Are we questioning the power dynamics? Are we questioning the assumptions there? We then go into the level of networks and of sharing information and sharing capacity laterally. And I love the analogy of the underground station map, the underground map, should I say, not station map, the underground map in London. It is such a good example of taking a very, very complex system and making it simple and accessible. And the thing about this was that it makes it available for all. It has taken the map from a geographical map that shows all sorts of railway lines and distances and the conventional way in which we think about navigating our way around the world. And it has put it into a symbolic, simple to understand format, using color, using impact points. It's very much from the user perspective. And it was designed specifically for the user. It was designed by someone who worked as a signal person on the railways and who recognized how confusing it was for people to navigate their way around. And at first it was really rejected, and it built up from first 500. It took 2 years to get 500 of these printed, and it's now in the billions of how many of these maps are printed and used on a daily basis. And the thing that I like about this is when we're thinking about networks, it's looking at simplicity. How do you create simplicity? How do you create flow? How do you create shared understanding for people that are not in the know? All they want to do is understand how to connect A or B, how to get some function done. How do you ensure that those systems flow? And for me, one of the key points is to look for the places with the most intersections and to ensure that there is agility in those places. Take some of the ideas that we've talked about. I know that's a very general sweeping statement, but we can take all these ideas that we've learned about in these 2 days. We can go back to work, go back to our workspace and go, oh, where do I start? One of the places to look for is the key impact points, the places where most lines converge. And if you take it even down further, when we go into our sprints, to prioritize some of the so-called soft skills and soft outputs into our sprints, to bring in our understanding of users, to bring in knowing why people are using what we're doing at a much deeper level than just understanding the demographics or the simple high-level thing. And this is where design thinking, customer experience comes in, but really understanding the need to create space and prioritize the development of understanding and communication as part of our sprints, not just the doables, and we don't create the time to really understand that. So working at network level, looking at ways to create impact, to smooth flow, and to create space to ensure that we understand what that flow is and what is needed at that level. And then there's at a more personal level, what is it that keeps the spark going? How do we keep this connectivity going? How do we ensure that we are not dysfunctional because we've got the perfect light bulb and we've got the perfect connection, but we haven't ever plugged it in? How do we plug that in? And this is talking about teams, it's talking about people, it's talking about products. We need to ensure that the circuit is alive, that it's plugged in. We need to keep ourselves conscious and trained. We need to keep our eyes constantly scanning our horizon. We need to have a sense of how what we do fits into the greater whole. Because when we are sitting in our own little silos with our blinkers on, focused on our day-to-day stresses and priorities, we are forgetting where our circuitry comes from. We are forgetting how we connect in there. And often that's where glitches happen. That's where we become sometimes less agile because we're just getting on with our tasks. And so I think that we need to obsess over user experience and customer experience in this level. We need to understand how our work is influencing others. We need to understand what their needs and their desires are. So I'm talking about agility, including a lot of communication. We need to create connections and really share the flow of information. I can't say this enough. When I work in organizations, I notice how often information pools with certain people or in certain departments or in certain spaces. And really beautiful insights are surfaced constantly, but they're not surfaced in places in which it gets shared. It doesn't come into a common pool. Even with your Kanbans or your visual information, as Archer said yesterday, so often those are just out of date. We stop using them. We go back to our unhealthy business as usual. So really ensuring that we keep the spark going, that we keep fluidity and flow going. That's an individual practice, and that's individual accountability as well as collective. We can't just wait for the collective to do it. So going back to those leadership archetypes, I guess I'm calling on us as individuals to model the change that we want to see. And I know that line has come up a lot as well. But don't try and do it all at once. Pick the bit that you are most excited about. Pick the bit that really resonates for you, that gives you a sense of, that's something that just lights me up. What lights up your own personal light bulb? The rebel leader is the rallying call to action. But before you start going in and trying to persuade everyone, what do I stand for? Being very clear about who I am and what I stand for gives me the courage and the core strength to make a rallying call for action, to persuade, to do all the work that it takes to get agility practices more embedded into our organizations. Understanding what it is about agility that I stand for. Why do I stand for that? Really bedding down into that. We can't scale if we don't go deep first. We need to be anchored if we're going to scale. And for me, that starts with who am I and what do I stand for? If we call to our visionary aspect, we're dreaming things into excellence. We're constantly looking to create excellence. We have this vision. How could this be better? Looking around, asking that question, okay, I've seen there's a lot of gaps here in my workforce. How could this be better? How could I do my work better? Where could this be better? Who can help to make this better? Who are my allies? Who are the catalysts? Who are the people that if I persuaded that person, it would make a significant difference? So many decisions go on behind closed doors. How can you influence people that are catalysts, people that can be an ally behind closed doors? How can you influence people that get excited and are just going to go and speak on your behalf all over the place? How do you get people's buy-in? Who can help to make this better? Questions just to ask yourself as you think about what aspects you're taking out of this conference. And then as a guide, if I'm going to support and hold space, what are my signature strengths? So often, and particularly now, when so many people are heading to burnout or feeling burnt out, feeling exhausted, feeling so disrupted, so change fatigued, that if you bring them another idea, they just don't know what to do with it. We're all feeling different levels of overwhelm and tiredness and change fatigue. So trying to upskill or to be all things to everybody, or to go out there and try and be the champion of everything is an exhausting process. We don't have that inner capacity. It's like trying to run your car without petrol. So understanding our strengths, what are my signature strengths? How can I lean in when my strengths are called for? How can I offer my strengths as a guide in this particular instance? Where is that place? Where is the place that I can be the guide? And lean in there. Don't try and lean in everywhere because you will exhaust yourself. Choose the places that your strengths can most shine because that is the most persuasive place, and lean in from there. So we've talked about this. We need to be willing to model the change, and mindset might not be everything, but it certainly impacts everything. And our own mindset, our own conviction, our own sense that we just know it, that it's just right. If only everyone would get onto the Agile bandwagon, everything would be fine. We want to do that. We believe that, but we have to constantly question our mindset. We have to constantly show up and make sure that what we are doing is genuinely agile, not just speaking agile. We need to check our own assumptions. We need to question our own habits. And mindset is where this plays such an important role. Because in order to make genuine change and in order to be a truly agile team or organization, we need to constantly move from our comfort zone through the fear and learning zone into the growth zone. And this is something that we find really hard because most of us, our human brain has a whole lovely primal system primed to keep us safe. And the way it does that, especially when we're under stress, is keep us in our comfort zone. Now, if we are clever and if we are agile and if we have good language, there's a very good chance that our brain is keeping us in comfort zone and we're still talking the change language, but we're not necessarily questioning ourselves. Are we doing the change behaviors? And so working with recognizing that we need to constantly question ourselves. We need to constantly check in with our teams. We need to be willing to challenge business as usual. And so that's why I didn't include business as usual in my title page, because BAU is something that I think is being severely disrupted. And if we are constantly trying to move back to BAU, we might just be pushing back to comfort zone. Business as usual can be riddled with habits, with cumbersome systems that are out of date, with very complex ways. I always think of when you go to the airport and you can just see there's passport control and you can just walk there. But instead you have to walk this very convoluted path to get there, even if you're the only person in there. That's what we often do with business as usual. We're so used to the way it was, and it's so different now. Even 2 years after COVID, we all know how different things are. We need to be interrogating our business as usual. And I'll give you an example of General Electric. And General Electric is well known for Jack Welch, who wrote From Good to Great. And in 2010, they were the fourth position on the Fortune 100 companies. And in 2021, they were the 38th position in the top Fortune 100. In the last 7 years, they've made a cumulative loss of 35 billion American dollars. And they have lost their space on the Dow Jones Industrial, which is for the first time in 100 years. They were the first company that was on the Dow Jones for 100 years, and they've lost that position. And I suspect that it is an attachment to business as usual, because within the last 7 years, they changed their vision. They had a massive transformative purpose, and that was they wanted to be the best. That was their purpose. Everybody bought into that vision, and they changed it to making the numbers at all costs. And that was 7 years ago. And they invested heavily into fossil fuels. They focused their investment on efficiency. They were looking to try and maintain business as usual as things started to get more and more disrupted. And if you remember that disruption didn't start with COVID, obviously, it started a long time before then, and people were getting scared. And I'm not saying, it's not for me to say General Electric got scared. I have no idea what went on there. But for me, that speaks to what is human behavior. We shut down, we hold on when things get rough. And we've still got this great name, and we know that we're fabulous, and we've always been fabulous, so we trust what got us there, rather than interrogating that and questioning that and saying, hold on a minute, is this still valid? Is this still relevant? And I think that we need to not be afraid of disruption. We need to constantly look to optimize and to look for creating that shared understanding, for taking all of us through the fear zone, for taking all of us through the learning zone, and recognizing we do that constantly. That is a continuous act. Just because I wasn't afraid last week and I stood up and did something amazing doesn't mean I've got it down pat this week. We need to interrogate ourselves. We need to interrogate our teams. We need to interrogate our business systems. This is a big challenge, to keep ourselves in the growth zone constantly conquering our objectives. We need to be setting new goals, questioning. So where are the clues? We can't do all that. We're not all responsible for it all the time. But the clues are in the points that have already been raised. I know Arta talked about the vicious cycles, and Hoden talked today as well a lot about the challenges of leadership and the sort of the blocks that occur in culture, in leadership, in communication flow, in sharing, in what we measure, in who makes decisions and why, and in our general operating systems. What do we stand for? What are we doing? So these are the places as individuals we start looking for clues. If you want to make an impact and you want to create agility, you can do it as much as you like in your scrums, but if these are not agile, that's where you're going to come up against the obstacles. So the basic hack is you don't have to save the world. There is a way to look, how do I reduce friction? How do I minimize delays? Where do I ensure connectivity? How do I simplify end to end? Onboarding and consulting with stakeholders early, constantly talking about your ideas, constantly involving everybody, making sure that when you're running your scrums, you're including other people, sharing information, include your support teams or support people early. Look for intersectional impact points. So basically, communicate inclusively, communicate broadly and early and lots, and choose to make a difference at the place where there's the most intersectionality, because that is the place that you will have the most impact. Don't overanalyze. This wave of change is continuous. It's not going to be over. This is not the end of change. This is not the end of our need for being agile. So keep agile, keep moving. Don't allow it to hit you unexpectedly. Don't spend too much time trying to embed everything and get it down into systemic details. Don't analyze too much. Keep it moving, keep it agile. And when it's complex, remember that the essential, look for what is not negotiable, what is essential, and hold on to that at all costs and let the rest go. Because when you are dealing with volatility, when you're dealing with turbulence, it's easier to travel light. It's easier to remain agile when you're light. So that need to hold on to the way things were, you're going to need to let a lot of that go. And so allowing ourselves to be agile in that and allowing ourselves to let go is part of the power of moving forward and keeping agility relevant. And the last thing is just, there will always be, probably always, maybe not, we can interrogate this too. I'm noticing my time and I'm nearly finished. There's 5 common business priorities. And if we take our agility and we are always looking to how does it impact increasing revenues or decreasing costs, making things viable, repeating sales, etc., etc. If we can language that as our frame, if we can use that as framing for getting buy-in, it helps us navigate business as usual. Business as usual is looking to these. If we can find a way to say, if we don't do anything, this is what it will cost. This is what we would save if we do something. Starting to speak in a language that speaks to business as usual and brings in agility and brings in rebellion and brings in questioning and brings in different ways of doing things, we're going to start making a real difference. And I know that that's not a very in-depth understanding about it, but I know that you have got depth from these last few days. So the last thing I leave you with is this word, this tiny little word, and. When you are navigating all sorts of disruptions and you have the ways of doing things, the word and who else can we include, and what else can we do, and what else can we prototype, and what else is a possibility, and how else could we do, and inclusive and options, creating options. So that is my quick run through, but what I really hope that it leaves you with is a sense of taking one thing forward and placing that in a place where you can hope it makes the biggest difference, and bringing your agility into there rather than trying to change the whole organization or the whole team all at once. Look for impact. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm really happy to to answer, and I'll look at the chat while you talk.
Wow. Just wow. All of you, just wow.
Questions, any comments?
Lesanne, that was fantastic. Again, whenever I refer to my parents, you know that I've been, I've learned something massive, and yeah, I've never looked at BAU like that. That's yes, I think I'll message you separately on that. That's really...
I have to say, I'm a bit of a rebel when it comes to BAU. I'm constantly saying, "Come, move it up."
Well, yeah, because I kind of think it's like it's a bit of a sop myself, but you've kind of taken that concept of SOP to the next level as to how you can turn it into something that is communicable up and down the line of the organization. So yeah, thanks for that. That really helps me, and it helps me in my present situation. So
I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. Thanks, Robin.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate that too, because I'm actually having this really interesting journey with my leadership. As you've seen my presentation, I never mentioned BAU. And the conversations here in the UK business unit is, we need to keep the lights on. And my conversations with them is, okay, while we keep the lights on, there are going to be disruptors in the system who are going to come and take off our business. So how do we connect the delivery and the BAU relationships together? And they're like, oh, that's just too much. And I'm like, okay, well, let's have a conversation on why it's too much, because we have blockers here that you could help out. You have the skills for it. This 80% BAU is not really working for us right now. What could you gain in return? And trying to broker these communities, and then hopefully before Christmas, we're intending to bring them together to say what good looks like in our future. And the whole shared backlog might potentially be an idea. Some of them have that light bulb moment now, but the rest of the system is like, oh, I don't know if we can cope with that. So there is a bit of a conversation, holding that space, allowing that creativity to thrive where there is energy. And I think we're going to break the whole language of BAU and see it differently for a change.
Well, you know, I love the fact that you say that in the UK, because I have clients in the UK a lot, and I notice quite a big difference. But I so believe that Africa brings agility to a lot of that. When you talk about keeping the lights on, I want to laugh because I'm sitting in South Africa. We have load shedding. We have power off right at the moment. We have learned how to do business with the lights off. And we have learned how to run in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's like this attachment to keeping the lights on. Oh, sorry, we just work in the dark. That's how it goes.
Totally agree with you, but
That's a great analogy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm really, I just, you know, from this morning, from Hudan to this presentation, you know, going back to Marcus, you know, Valente and Robin, and to your presentation, Lesanne, I have to say that I am really, really inspired. I'm really, really inspired. If I'm called upon to build or to set up a new government for Ghana or any African country, I know the people that I'll be calling on to coach those ministers and to coach the president or to coach whoever is going to be leading. I don't want to be in that position, but I would like to be somebody who facilitates that process of making sure that we select the right leadership. So you've all made me very reflective, and you know, I'm incredibly reflective because it feels like deja vu. It feels like I met you guys like 1,000 years ago when we were building these ancient, beautiful civilizations. It feels like we've been warriors, peaceful warriors, love warriors, you know, traveling that journey through time and distance. Yeah, it's really an amazing feeling that I'm not sure how I did it, but I've been able to pull together the right caliber of speakers. Yeah, this is really giving me a lot to think about. So thank you so much. I'm really inspired. Thank you.
I think there's such a good example in the chat from Zuchi again. I had similar things around just before COVID, etc., where she says she was working with senior management and they looked at, if you have a look in the chat about Ukraine, talking about chaos and confusion and mayhem and reactive mode as opposed to businesses, like because we're so afraid of letting go of business as usual. And I know that that's just not quite where you were going, Nana, but I just think that that's a typical example. And when you talk about working from ancient civilizations to now, this move that is emerging through, and it keeps building, and we have to keep reinventing it because it's the torus. It keeps moving and gets its energy from itself and then keeps moving. And I love it. Thank you.
This is definitely a movement, and the way I'm looking at this as well, I am a lot more confident now that we've got the right team of people. It is a movement that I have always wanted. This is what I call the Adinkra tribe. A tribe beyond color, a tribe beyond race, a tribe beyond gender, a tribe beyond nationality, a tribe beyond religion, just a tribe of human beings. And that's the reason why many years ago I came up with H2H. It's not about B2B, it's not about B2G, B2 business to government, business to employee, or business to customers, or business to business. It's really H2H, human to human. And that is what I have seen these last 2 days. And that's what's really, really, really inspiring me to say, I do know now that I've always been on the right track. It's never about race, color, gender, politics, religion, whatever. It's really about human beings. And what I really love about this year's conference is that there's been less talk about Agile and Scrum, but more about thinking and behavior and values and organizational design and this rebel leader, and just looking at the journeys, Hodan and everyone else. It's really a move. It's a community. So I'm inspired. So thank you so much. I mean, Nana Yao, all I can say at this point is a round of applause for Lesanne. A round of applause, a massive round of applause, and thank you for your presence. And I know that next year we'll definitely be, between now and next year, we'll be doing some stuff together. So yeah, thank you. Nana Yao, over to you. I think Patricia's in, and I know Lesanne has to dash off soon because she has a hard stop at 1:10 our time. So yeah, thank you so much.